Welcome to our LightBringers conversation today, which is Monday, April 12th. Our guest is Al Fike of Gibsons, British Columbia, Canada. I'm Lorraine Borchers in Bend, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the USA. And with me are Yvonne and Beth.
Hi, everybody. I'm Yvonne, and I'm from Central Pennsylvania. And I'm just so happy to be here to hear Al's story.
Hi, I'm Beth and I come from Lincolnshire in the UK. And equally, I'm very excited and looking forward to hearing his story. But before we start, shall we have a prayer?
Yes, let's do that.
Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together on this beautiful day. Please bless everyone on the divine love path. And today, please be with us. And be with Al especially as he shares his faith journey with us. May everyone who's watching this recording, please may that bring them more information. May everyone who's watching this learn of God's love. We love you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Lovely way to start our conversation, Beth. Thank you so much. So now we get to go to Al. Al, if you'll give us a brief introduction of where you are and then go into your story, that'd be awesome.
Well, my name is Al Fike, and I live on the west coast of Canada. I was born in Vancouver, BC, and lived all of my life on the west coast of Canada. It's only in retirement that we actually moved out of the big city into a small town, a seaside town, which is very scenic. Looks like we're living on the edge of a fjord, and lots of mountains and scenery. We have a lovely view from our home, and we're living very peacefully and beautifully in this gorgeous place on the earth, and a place that is not overpopulated, polluted, and full of the problems of the world. We seem very far away from all of that. And it's a beautiful place to have a spiritual life, let me tell you. And we feel very blessed for that. So my story, it's a bit of a long one because my spiritual life has encompassed most of my life. It didn't start out that way. I was born a sensitive child, and when I reviewed Cheryl Henry's story about what it was like to be a sensitive child, I thought, yeah, that's me. That's how I was too. So I really related to her story. But the difference is being a boy and having those kind of sensitivities is not a good combination, especially where I grew up, which was in a working class neighborhood in Vancouver. And in the 50s, the kind of machismo attitudes were certainly very prevalent. So I had a rough time. I had a twin brother who was himself a bit of a bully, but in a way, it was to my benefit because he threatened all of his friends if they ever beat me up, he would beat them up. But him and I fought every day, and he would have his own little punching bag. And even, I could fend for myself, certainly as a younger kid, but as time went on, it was getting a little difficult to fend off my brother's tendency to want to rile me up and then get me in some kind of headlock or something, and I couldn't do anything. I'd just be so frustrated. It was terrible. Anyway, it was a normal kind of upbringing for, kind of lower middle class Canadian family. My father was very absent. He worked on ships, so he wasn't around a lot. My mother was a gentle, loving soul. We kind of had free reign of the house when my father wasn't around, and then he would come in and impose his rule, and then he'd leave again, then we had free reign again. So it was an interesting combination of parental styles and whatnot. But I was close to my mother, and I was kind of, most of my childhood, I was fairly isolated. I didn't relate well to other kids, yet I wanted to, but it's kind of the way my wiring was, the way I was. It didn't fit well with the kind of social norms of the day, and I just knew I was different. And I didn't like myself because of that. I felt like I was cursed. And although I had a fairly good childhood in the beginning, we lived in what was then a semi-rural area in Vancouver. You got to realize that Vancouver, when I grew up, was a small town. It was like a small city, I guess. And since then to now, it's grown about 4 or 5 times the size of what it was then. So there are huge changes there. But where we lived on what seemed like the outskirts of Vancouver had fields and even a farm and a pottery and all kinds of interesting things for kids to do. So we had a good time playing around there. And it was not like I was completely isolated, but I didn't have a really good friend. I just kind of hung out with my brother and his friends or whatever was going on in the neighborhood. And then we moved at age 13, we moved to another city in North Vancouver, which is kind of a suburb of Vancouver. And I just could not adjust. I was alone and I just couldn't make friends. I was just, and very shy, I lacked confidence. And going through puberty and whatnot, it was just a rough time for me. And I actually never got over it until I was about 17. And, but in the meantime, I did a lot of reading and I had a real interest in spiritual books and psychic phenomena. So I started out with a guy named Lobsang T. Rampa, and these were little kind of paperback books that came out and they were cheap to buy. And Lobsang T. Rampa was actually a butcher in Brighton. And he was a total fake. But he wrote great books, so I just gobbled them up. And then I progressed on to Edgar Casey and other books like Dom Ross and Seth and a whole series of books. You know, I just couldn't get enough of this stuff. So from about age 15 on, and certainly into my 20s, I was reading a lot of these books. And it's interesting that my friend Jeff said, well, you've never read anything, you know, but I said, yeah, I've read all these books. I read them when I was young, you know, kind of went through that phase. So anyway, at age 17, I kind of found some courage to get out there in the world. And I really felt like I needed to, you know, and rather than fear being the motivating factor, was more an interest and excitement as to what the world could bring. I started to grow my hair long and hang out with people with long hair and this kind of thing. And so I graduated. I was fairly good with the academics, but not brilliant by any stretch. But I certainly did well enough that I could go to university. And I went to university for a couple of years, hoping again to meet people and all of that, and I did. And I also met a girl, and the girl introduced me to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So that kind of derailed my academic future. I mean, after all this lack of experience in life, all of a sudden the doors flung open and I just dove in both feet, and I had a ball. I really had a great time. I didn't overdo things to any stretch, but I I carried on working and things like that, and because I had quit university by then, because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what to do with university, so I just laughed. I thought, well, what's the point? And so then I moved out of the house. We moved into a communal house with my girlfriend and whatnot. My best friend was living there, and all of that. We had lots of fun and games, and then at one point, my best friend ran away with my girlfriend. So it was a real tough time for me. I mean, it was like I opened myself up to the world, and then I felt betrayed. So it was difficult to deal with that stuff. But anyway, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but in the interim, I found something called Jore, and that's a Japanese healing religion, very similar to Reiki, and because Reiki is from Japan as well, so very similar philosophy. It was kind of I think of it as a precursor to Reiki, and I was really intrigued with it. So I signed up, and I got what they call my sacred focal point, this little bag that you wear around at your solar plexus level there, that had the Japanese calligraphy of light on paper, rice paper, wrapped in 7 silk bags. And in order to be able to channel what they call the divine light, you had to have this initiation and these bags. So I went through all that, and I wore my sacred focal point, and we would sit in rows facing each other, and we would channel the divine light to each other, kind of a scanning of the body. And we'd all feel it. It was powerful enough we could all feel it. And I brought my friends into it as well. I was very enthusiastic, and I even thought I'd be a minister for Jore. I was that intrigued by it. Now, Jore is a very natural love kind of philosophy, about reincarnation, this and that, the other thing. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And during that time, I was looking for a job, and my mother was next door to this little organization that was offering someone employment to do gardening and home maintenance for seniors and handicapped people as a public service. At that time in Canada, the old Trudeau was in power, and he was very much a socialist, and he opened up all these programs, these make work programs, and one of them was this LIP grant, which allowed people to work in social projects in the community. So this is one of them. And it kind of intrigued me because, we're into Jore. Of course, if it's a legitimate spiritual thing, they always talk about service, of doing things for others. So I thought, oh, here's an opportunity. I can be of service here. So I went and talked to Barbara Davies, her office was next door to my mother's office in West Vancouver. And she hired me on the spot. And later she told me that she saw a light over my head, and that spirit told her, this is the one you're supposed to hire, and this is the one you're supposed to mentor spiritually. So she kind of knew what was going on, but she wouldn't tell me everything at the beginning. And so then started a very deep and profound relationship with Barbara Davies. And I remember her inviting me to dinner soon after we met, soon after we had some conversations. I was telling her all about Jore and whatnot. She's kind of listening and smiling and nodding and all that stuff. And she said, oh, well, come over for dinner and we'll talk more. So I came over. It was just, she was on her own. She had 3 kids, but it was, she made me a dinner. And I still remember to this day that for dessert, we had 3 pies, and each one was a different flavor. And pie is my favorite thing in the whole world. So she had me right there at the pies, you know. And so we talked, and she said, and then she started to tell me that she was a medium. And I was really intrigued. Like, I mean, I'd never met a medium before. So I said, and do you want to pray? And maybe, you know, spirit will come through and speak. So, and she also told me about divine love in this conversation. So I said, okay. So we, right at the kitchen table after dinner, we had this prayer, and Confucius, and if anybody's seen Confucius come through, actually your face changes. Hers especially, it was very pronounced. Even her eyes went into the Chinese form. And you know, this puckered mouth and everything else is very dramatic. And I'm actually feeling scared and intrigued at the same time, because I'd never say anything like it. It's like, oh my God, this is, you know, different. And he spoke to me, and he kind of said, he wasn't very inviting. He said, because of what I was doing, I was smoking dope with my buddies and all this stuff. I was, you know, living a kind of hedonistic life in a way. And he said, we only take those who are strong. That's kind of his theme. You know, you got to clean up your act if you think you're going to be a part of this, or if there's a possibility that you might be involved with this, and we only take those who are strong. In other words, those who are willing to give up their appetites of the flesh, to a degree at least, and be a part of this. So anyway, I was very intrigued. I also felt, and I'd gone away for that weekend with my mother and her boyfriend were going to Vancouver Island. I had tagged along with them. And I remember walking along the beaches. It's a beautiful area in BC with beautiful sandy beaches. And I had this burning sensation in my solar plexus and a kind of joy bubbling up into my consciousness. And I had conflict because I was going to be a Jore person. And here is this other philosophy. And, you know, Barb told me a few things about it. And I thought, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit. So my mind is going off in this conflict of, well, no, this isn't really where it's at. You know, what I'm thinking is where it's at. And yet inside of me, in my soul, I knew this is where it was at. So anyway, this kind of back and forth conflict went on for a few years, actually, with lots of conversations with Barb, and Barb being a medium. I mean, I was getting messages from spirit practically every day when we were together in the office, because there were periods of time with this job that I was doing where there wasn't much going on at all. You know, you relied on people phoning in asking for some help. So there were dry periods and there were busy periods. During the dry periods, Barb and I would just talk up a storm about all the spiritual stuff. And of course, she gave me Padgett and said, she only had one copy. And she said, this is my Bible, don't lose it, you know, but I want you to read this and whatnot. So I was gradually, I'm moving further into the divine love ideas. And but this great dilemma of the Jore and the sacred focal point and the philosophy behind that, and then the divine love. And Barb said to me, well, I can see your aura and you have a healing gift, because Jore was all about healing. And she said, and I said, well, yeah, but I can't do healing within my sacred focal point. We're talking about the difference here. And she says, oh, I think you can. I said, well, I don't think so. I mean, this thing has been ordained. I've been given the gift. And she said, no, you've always had the gift. You were born with it. And I said, well, and she said, why don't you try something? You don't have to tell anybody, but go to one of your Joy meetings and don't wear your sacred focal point. See what happens. See if anything comes without this talisman that you have to wear. So I did. I said, well, I was reluctant. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. It's like, even though this is part of my nature, I'm always resistant, but there's something else that always tells me, be brave and, just try it out, see if it works. So I did. I went to the meeting and we did our ritual, and this fellow, John Bullock, who had cerebral palsy, was a good friend of mine, was sitting across from me, and we had to do our thing. I did him, he did me. And then afterwards I said, John, did you feel anything from that? And John said, that's the most powerful experience I've had so far. I almost fell off the bench. It was so powerful. And I said, oh, well, I'm not wearing my sacred focal point. And there was a collective gasp in the room. And it's like an, uh-oh, what do we do with this kind of thing? So I kept not wearing my sacred focal point, going to the meetings, and eventually they had to send up a minister from Los Angeles to boot me out. So I got royally booted from Jore because I wasn't following the rules. And, in retrospect, that was reasonable. And so now I'm completely in the camp of divine love. And many things started happening to me. Spirit was very close in this period, about a 2-year period of praying a lot and reading a lot and sensing Spirit around me a lot. And during that period of time, I had what I call a calling, and I don't want to go into all the details about that. That's been written down. I've also spoke about it on occasions, but I had an experience with Jesus coming to me and showing me my future and explaining to me what my life is going to be. And this is what Barb knew right from the beginning. This is what was shared with her. And she knew enough not to get into too many details, because although she did say, I'm going to have a wonderful life, she said, I'm going to travel the world and I'm going to have all kinds of experiences with people, meeting different people, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a wonderful life. And I'm thinking, I don't think so. I mean, I don't have any special gifts or talents to make this come true. But anyway, I kind of pass it off as Barb just being very enthusiastic and loving. And so then Jesus kind of confirmed this and showed me my gifts and all of that. And I was completely overwhelmed and ecstatic and joyful and, I don't know, tearful at the same time. It was one of those life-changing experiences where you feel every emotion and your mind just goes into this other place where you're accepting and seeing and believing and knowing at the same time. It's the soul awakening experience. And so this kind of confirmed me on the path of divine love. And then, life carries on. I hadn't met Jean by then. And we had the opportunity to go to the Philippines. I'd never been out of the country. I'd never flown anywhere. And we were going to do this big flight to the Philippines because in the Philippines were these gifted psychics called the psychic surgeons. And I had 2 friends, one with polio and one with cerebral palsy, who wanted to go down and see if they could help them. And in Vancouver, it was all the rage to go down there. There was a talk show host in Vancouver that just talked us up every day. And he was well known in Vancouver. He wasn't considered a crackpot. So everybody knew of this, and it was, flights of people were going down there. He had been down there and had an experience, and so we thought they thought they should go. And I said, well, you're not going to go without me. I'm going too. And we went down there and we met this healer called Thelma, and she did all of these surgeries. And what psychic surgeons do, which unless you see it, you never believe it. They just take their hand and they reach into your body. They go through the flesh into your organs and whatnot and pull out whatever needs to be taken out, impurities, tumors, whatever. And I experienced this, at least 50 times, especially on my friend. She did some operations on me. There's some funny stories about that, but I don't think we have time for that. But and then she said to me after all this time, and by the way, her guides came to her and said, do whatever you need to do with them, but don't charge them. So we got it all for free. We got this special attention. And then this Thelma came to me and said, you can do this and I can teach you. You have the gift to be able to do this. Would you like to stay here? And this other woman who was there, an American woman who was, I think, in her late 20s. I was like 21 or I think 21, 22 maybe at the time. And she was like 29 or 30 or something. And she said, and you will marry this woman. And the woman looks me up and down and says, I'm not going to marry him. A skinny little guy with long hair. I had long blonde hair and I was skinny as a rail. And when I walked down the street in Manila, people would stop and stare open-jawed at me because they never seen anything like it, So I was a bit of a novelty in Manila at the time. By the way, back then, people all wore 6 guns, 6 shooters, and the currency was American silver dollars. So it was a very odd place. And of course, it was all new to us. I mean, the poverty there was breathtaking in its scope. And it took me days to get over it. I was just in shock as to what people were living like there and what the conditions were like, et cetera. And here we are in this beautiful hotel that, had everything and it was just like night and day, this experience. Of course, for Canadians to go down there, it was cheap as dirt. I mean, I think it was $18 a night for me and all our food for the hotel. And anyway, I digress. And so I had a decision to make there and then. Am I going to go with this? It was exciting, there's lots going on, and this is really interesting, and I could maybe bring this to North America and all that stuff. And so, it was an interesting invitation and a pretty intense test. Like, what are you going to do here? So I prayed about it, and my gut feeling was no, not to do it, to go back and carry on with your apprenticeship in divine love, that was the thing, that this wasn't. So I went home, and shortly after, I met Terry Adler, who I hope you're going to interview one of these days, and introduced her to Barb, and those two became lifelong friends, sisters, as they call each other. And then fairly shortly after that, I met Jean. I was introduced to Jean through Barbara and through a woman who had been praying for divine love in Vancouver for many years, who was associated with Alec. Now, Alec wasn't around at that time. He had passed away suddenly. He was at age 50. But before that, he had many groups in Vancouver that he was teaching divine love and also developing mediums. So he had a real going concern. He was an RCMP officer, retired, but always psychic. He was very psychic all of his life. And he had been guided to a Paget book in a used bookstore. And he grabbed it and took it home. He read a few pages, thought, this is too religious for me, and he put it aside. but his guides kept telling him, read that book, read that book. So eventually he actually sat down and seriously read it. And that changed his whole perspective on what he wanted to do with his gifts, and his work spiritually was actually involved in the church that I'm now the president of many years ago. So, it's kind of a lineage here that's happening with this particular church. And so he developed Ellie as a medium, and he also developed Barb as a medium, because Barb met him and there's a whole story there, which I could go on about, but lots of guided circumstances brought Barb into Alec's circle. So that's how she learned about divine love and carried on to me. And so anyway, they parted when Alec died. They all kind of dispersed into their own corners, because Alec was a very domineering leader, and people just didn't know what to do once he was gone. So they kind of, did their own thing. And Elliot met Jean in the bank where they were working. So anyway, Ellie was in parallel mentoring Jean, while Barb was mentoring me. And then Ellie and Barb met each other in a bank in North Vancouver, because Ellie was working there. And that's an interesting story too, but again, too many details. And then Barb saw Ellie. Oh, Ellie, what are you doing here? Oh, I work here. She's a teller at the bank. And Barb says, oh, do you still believe in divine love? And she said, yes, of course I do. And she said, oh, we should get together and have a prayer together for divine love. So during that time, Barb and I and another woman, Elsie Pell, got together as a little circle praying for divine love once a week. So she invited Ellie into that circle. And so Jean was away in Provo, Utah, getting her master's or bachelor's in education. And so I just met Ellie, and we really hit it off. And so now I had two mentors. I had Ellie and Barb. And I'd spent all my time, this is weird, this 20-something-year-old guy spending his time. By that time, my girlfriend and best friend had run off. So I was kind of on my own. So one might almost think it was orchestrated. And so we were just having conversation after conversation about divine love and all this. So I'm saturated in divine love, and and Alec is close. He was kind of like my first guide, and he was, bringing me some guidance, and I knew he was there and all that. So I thought of him as my surrogate father. He was that close to me. So Jean and I were introduced by Ellie once Jean came home for Christmas. We had a torrid and passionate love affair. And we had vowed or knew that we were to marry. So that all came about on Christmas holidays over 2 weeks. And she went back to Provo, and I was left on my own, lovesick. And I wrote her a love letter every day. And sometimes we'd phone each other and just breathe over the telephone and talk and whatnot. And it was kind of intoxicating, but kind of frustrating at the same time, because we were going to be apart for 3 months, but and we had planned we'd get married in July. And so the 3 months went by very slowly, but anyway, after that it was all joy and wonderment. And then we got married, and Jesus actually married us. I could see him. He was there beside the minister, and other spirits were there too. And little Goldie was the flower girl, and it was, I thought I would be petrified and not enjoy this, what was an outdoor wedding in Stanley Park, which is a very romantic setting with the ocean and sailboats going by and the scenery and this beautiful grassy patch and all of us in a circle. It was just gorgeous. But I wasn't nervous. I just felt joyful, like just absolutely joyful. So we began our marriage, and we both loved travel, and we both aspired to travel. And we did actually, Jean won a cruise. Within a couple of months of getting married, she won this cruise. So we went down to Mexico and stuff. That was our first, well, actually, I went to take her home from Utah. We drove back. So that was our kind of pre-honeymoon. And then we did all these other things, went to Hawaii and Mexico and all that. So we were both on the same page spiritually and prayed together. It was wonderful to have a mate who was also into divine love and we're supporting one another in that. And our friends, Ellie and Barb, and we were part of a circle in West Vancouver that lasted 42 years. We came together once a week into this circle and had many wonderful prayers together. And the only kind of downside of the circle was it was very insular, and Barb did not want anybody new in there because she was the medium and she felt like she didn't want to take on any other influences. She wanted all celestial. That's where I got my edicts about all celestial from. And another guy named Bert, he was very adamant about it too. And it was kind of the offshoot from Alex ideas about having circles and mediums and all of that. So he started that culture, and in many ways, my attitudes and how I feel about circles with mediums and spirits and all that comes from Alex beginning ideas about how to do this. And I still think he was right. Anyway, of course, we had children within a couple of years. The apprenticeship I had working for Barb, I was a terrible home maintenance guy. Many funny stories about my disasters in home maintenance. But I loved the gardening. I just loved it. And all these little ladies taught me what this was and how to do that, and what's good for this and all. And so I had this 4-year apprenticeship with these old ladies that were, became good friends, and I had a knack with seniors. I just knew how to talk to them and all of that. So I was the golden boy for them. They all loved me. And so anyway, when I had children, or when I learned that Jean was pregnant, I said, well, I've got to get serious about, what I'm going to do for a living. I'm going to be a father. And I was only 25 at the time. And so I thought, well, I think I'll carry on, I'll do a gardening business. So I put an ad in the paper 2 weeks running in a local North Shore paper where we lived. And the phone rang off the hook. And I had my entire business set up within 2 weeks. And I never looked back. So I had 35 years of self-employment where I was never without work and never a day without work. In fact, often I have too much work and I'd have to kind of pare back, and I would fire customers sometimes, the ones I didn't really like working with. I'd always do a season with them, but then I'd say at the end, well, I'm sorry, but I won't be back next year. I never left them in the lurch. But anyway, so that was from the time of having children up until into my, I'd say mid to late 40s was kind of routine. The psychic stuff kind of bled to the background because I was too busy with work and kids and, all the things you do in a life. And we did them all, we did travel, we did raise our children. And, Jean was a stay-at-home mom till the boys were one, I think Eric was 7 or Paul was 7, something like that. And then she was working. So we're both busy, and we're both, when we get home, we're tired and all of that. I'd always pray first thing in the morning. I'd take 20 minutes, even when the kids were babies. I'd go up to our bedroom. I had a little rocking chair there, and I'd sit and pray for 20 minutes for divine love. And I'd tell the kids under no uncertain terms, you're not to come up into the room when I'm up in there, and to stay out. And sure enough, they'd try, they'd sneak. You could hear them coming up. Our room was upstairs, up the stairs, and the door creaking open, and they would come in, and I'd shoo them away. But anyway, generally, my prayer life was consistent, always, 7 days a week, always consistent. This one day a week at the circle, consistent through the years, over and over. And so when I got into when the kids are older, and I kind of came back into my own spiritually, because I kind of had the time and the inclinations and whatnot, then things started to open up again. And I think when I was about 55, spirit came to me, because I was again communicating quite fluidly with spirit. I think it was Andrew came to me and said, it's time to step forward. And I said, and do what? What do you want me to do? It's time to step forward. And I said, yes, I understand, but what do you want me to do? And he said, we want to speak through you. And I said, me? You want to speak through me? I said, I'm not a medium. And they said, well, I beg to differ with you. I believe that you are a medium, and we wish to use those gifts now. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, I guess we can try it, And I said, okay, well, I guess we'll give it a go, but I didn't really believe it. And so the next circle, we had a spirit came through. Was it Kia? I can't remember who came through.
Andrew.
Was it Andrew? It was Andrew. Anyway, he said, yes, this medium doesn't believe he is gifted with mediumship, but we've been using him all along, and he hasn't even known it. So that gift is fairly well established, and that's we can come through today unimpeded. So that was part of the agenda. I want to go back a little bit, with our little group. Jean and I always had a feeling that we should be reaching out to people. And so we kind of, tried this way and that. And we got in touch with Victor Summers, who was the FCNB president at the time in the 80s. And we were going down. By this time, Ellie had moved down to San Diego. She had met a guy who lived in San Diego, and she got married. And so we wanted to go down to visit her, and Victor Summers lived in San Diego at the time. So we went down to visit him as well. And we found him very eccentric. But he opened a door when we were there visiting him. He opened a door, and there in a room in piles were all the transcripts, the original transcripts of Paget. They were all there, just kind of in boxes and kind of lying around, and all of that. And, of course, our eyes went like this, like, whoa. And I wonder if they're safe, because he was kind of cavalier about it. And eventually, they weren't safe, that he started distributing them amongst his friends. He divided up the collection. And it took 20, 30 years to get them all back together again. It was only just recently that this happened. Anyway, we weren't impressed with Victor. He was a bit, in our mind, a bit odd, a bit eccentric, and didn't get a good vibe from him. But on our way home, as we drove home, lots of different things happened that he said would happen to us. And again, more stories I don't want to go into, but anyway. And then we met George Stokes around 1988 or 89. He came up to Vancouver. He'd heard about us. And another very eccentric individual. We kind of thought of him as a bit of a cult leader. And he had his minions around him. And he said to us, I have $750,000 and I can build a church here if you want to. If you want me to, I'll do it. And we all said no, that we didn't want to do that with him, because the way he viewed divine love and all of that wasn't our way. So that kind of being cloistered kind of was the right thing to do, because there are all these influences and all these practices and perspectives out there around divine love, which were kind of not viable. They weren't sustainable, because George was the absolute leader, and everything he said went. And Victor was, I don't know, he's a bit off his rocker, if you don't mind me saying so. And it was just kind of shocking to see what was going on out there around divine love. And I know there was, what's the lady's name on the East Coast who was, I think, doing it right? Jocelyn. But we had never been able to meet her, so that never happened. Anyway, so I'll go back. So I'm now a medium, and I'm enjoying it. It's exciting. Things are coming through. Most of the stuff that came through in the beginning is kind of light stuff. Poor Barb, she was feeling kind of put out to pasture in a way, but she was getting dementia by then. And I think this is why they were wanting to use me, because they were seeing, I mean, we're getting basically the same message every time. So it wasn't going anywhere with her. And yet, that was her, people, we all looked to her, we all loved her, we all revered her in a way, although she was a pretty humble person. But, we looked to her for guidance and support, and she had deep insights, soulful insights into things that, it took me years and years and years to even, I can't match her gifts, but to even get anywhere near that. And so there was a bit of tension. Then, of course, we started to move out because of the internet and whatnot. We started to, I punched in divine love on the internet, and there all these websites came up. So I joined some of those and got into some conversations. And then Barb and Terry and Gina and I had decided we were going to take a reposition cruise from Vancouver to San Diego. And so a lot of these people that I was talking to were in the Los Angeles area. So I said, oh, we're coming to Los Angeles on this date. Would you like to get together and pray for divine love? So they said, sure, that's great. So they arranged, I think it was a hotel that we could stay in. This was after the end of our cruise. And so we got together with them and had some prayers. And, you know, this is kind of a coming out of my mediumship beyond, you know, people that I knew already, you know. And so that was all well and good. And they said, oh, we'd love to come up to Canada. I said, sure, come along. You know, this is, I think we met in the fall, and then they were to come in the summer. And then there were 4 of them. And so anyway, word got around that there was something going on in Canada and BC. And we started getting these emails. Can we come too? Can we come too? And we were going to have this retreat here in the house we're in now, because we had the house by then. And we thought, okay, we can hold 22 people in a circle in our living room. If we remove some of the furniture and put all the chairs together in a circle, we could fit that many. So sure enough, 22 asked if they could come, and we thought, okay, we're going to shut this off now. And Spirit said, no, don't do that. More are coming. And then we got a email from Helgi Merker. Said, would you allow somebody from Namibia to come and be in your circle? Here I'm thinking this Black woman is coming. We said, yes, of course, you know, come. But Helgi is white woman. I didn't realize about the history of Namibia that it was a German colony, and there are, you know, a fair number, just like in South Africa, there are a fair number of white people. And so by the time we were finished, 43 were coming. And then, of course, they had to billet all these people out. You know, we're worried about where they're all going to stay and all of this stuff. How are we going to fit them into a circle? But it all worked out. And then behind us is we pulled there's the kitchen or the dining room table. We pulled all that back, and we had rows of chairs. So we had what I called the peanut gallery. And then we had a circle here, and people kind of shifted around and all of that. And it was really the real coming out. And there were some wonderful messages that came through at that time, people having wonderful experiences. Jeff Cutler came, and Elizabeth Morana came. It was the meeting of nations, and we were Switzerland, because all of these factions now that we were not aware of, we're naive, we don't, because we were in our little corner, we didn't really realize all the politics and dynamics around that, and they all came together. And some of the highlights, I remember Elizabeth Morana actually saw Jesus for the first time. And the way she saw him was Jesus came through me, got me to stand up, and I felt this kind of cloak go over me. And she saw that, and it allowed her to be able to see him rather than me, channeling him. And Jeff Cutler was so impressed. He said, you must come to Australia. So we made that arrangement quite quickly. We went there in January, and this is July, so January of that year. We went down there. We spent 3 weeks with him. We did some traveling. We went to around Australia a bit, because, you know, we're travelers, we want to see everything. And at the end of it, he said, he gave us a fairly substantial amount of money to start our ministry. He said, it's time for you to go public, to be worldwide. So he gave us the seed money to do that. Good old Jeff. And we started a Divine Love Sanctuary and the nonprofit and all that stuff. And Bob's your uncle. And here we are today. We're doing the Zoom circles, and you know, things have evolved. The people we've met, the people who have contributed, the people that have opened up other doors for us, things just keep snowballing as we continue on. And it's been a wonderful journey. So I think I will stop there. You're muted, Lorraine.
That's one thing I always forget is to unmute. So awesome. Al. I knew some of that, but I hadn't heard all of the details. So I have a bunch of questions. I'm sure that Yvonne and Beth do.
Yeah, I do
Shoot.
too.
So, okay, well, this is the one that I always find so fascinating is when a child is sensitive, like you were, and obviously you and your brother were not identical twins,
No.
from what I gather.
Opposites.
So I think I see a lot more young children coming in that are sensitive, or maybe they're just in my life. What advice would you give to their parents to help them foster that and protect that little one?
Well, I think it's a fine line to walk when you want your children to be out in the world and experience the world, but you don't want them to get hurt. So, you know, the downside of sensitivity is you feel pain much more acutely, especially emotional pain. And the only advice I can give is for the parent to understand that the intensity of that pain that your children feel may not be like what you have felt, that it's different and it is more intense. And you need to acknowledge that and be more loving and more forgiving of that, and to protect when you have a gut feeling you need to.
Yeah.
But to also allow the child to go through the process of maturation and growing up rather than trying to protect them from all of the pains of the world, but to help them understand their own perspective and who they are, and to honor that. And I think parents do that much more readily these days than when I was a kid. I just got the message, you got to smarten up and you got to toughen up.
Right,
and go
boys
through
didn't
life like
cry.
this.
Yeah. Well, and I now practice asking for the cloak of protection for all those young ones, so that
That's a
even
good
if
thing to
their
do.
parents don't know, that will help them in some way.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a tough world out there, but we all got to go through it. You know, I look back at the difficulties I had, and to be quite honest, I loathed myself till I was about 40. I felt that my gifts were a curse. And
Yeah,
I
how
felt like,
sad.
why am I the way I am? I don't like this. You know, it made me very shy as an adult in the beginning. Thank God I had Jean to bring me out of my shell, because I don't know what I would have done otherwise. I mean, I was so shy, I would blush every time I talked to somebody. And all of that, you know, lack of understanding myself and sense of my own and acknowledgement of my own person was missing. It didn't come till later, because I believed all the messages that I got as a kid.
We do.
And it's not like my parents were mean, as most of the stuff came from outside children and people. You know, I was bullied and this and that, you know, for years. So, you know, you take in all that message. It took quite a shift in me, which I do accredit to divine love, to get over it.
But
Get over
children
myself.
do sense, don't they, when somebody's different to them,
And vulnerable.
and they are very quick to get in and take advantage of that. I mean, children can be really cruel at times.
Yeah.
The great gift from that was I went within. I had a very rich inner life. So
yeah.
a wonderful imagination, a creative bent. My gifts, you know, of vision and whatnot came from that, or at least that was the beginning of it. And so when I look back, I see that, you know, it wasn't a happy or easy life, but those difficult periods forged some amazing abilities later on in life. And now I'm a calm person. When people are abusive towards me, verbally or whatever,
You can,
it
you've
doesn't
been
shake
through
me at all.
fire.
I mean, I'm so used to that it's like, so,
Yeah.
when, like I get, not lately, but when I was beginning with the mediumship, I got a lot of negative feedback from people who didn't believe me, people that were
Yeah.
criticizing me and who are you and this, that, and the other thing. And even within the Divine Love community, I was getting that kind of stuff. Didn't deter me whatsoever.
That's
I just
amazing. You're
knew I had
getting
to
it.
carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing you're
Awesome.
getting it from the Divine Love community. Because I was going to ask you, Al, at what point did you sort of bring this out or share this with, say, friends, or did you in the early
Yeah,
days?
it came out with family. There were some stories when I first met Jean. When she went away back to school, her whole family heard the big rumor, Jean's getting married. Who is this guy? And they'd never met me. It's like a big secret, or sort of not a secret, but they hadn't met me. So they invited me for dinner. And that was very harrowing for me because Jean wasn't there.
Oh,
Ellie
my.
came along, thankfully. She was a friend of theirs. So, but anyway, then Judy, who you all know, a Divine Love follower, she wasn't at the time. She's quite young. She was like, I don't know how old, 17 or something like that. Her friend had a serious disease. Her ovaries were seriously infected, and the doctors had decided they were going to remove them. And she was like 17. She wouldn't have children or anything. So Judy had heard that I had a healing gift. So she phones me up. I guess she had my phone number, and asked me whether they could come over and whether I could give healing to her friend. So I said, yeah, sure, if you want to, come on over. I lived in a little bachelor apartment. And so they came over, and they were kind of nervous because, they don't know anything about me. And Judy, I don't think at that point had met me yet. And so I gave Marla the healing, and I said, oh, you got to come back one more time. But she could feel it. She could feel the energy in her lower abdomen, and she saw a white dove above her head. So, which I kind of think, because she was Catholic, I think, oh, that's divine love. That's great. And so she came back a second time. The doctors actually put her on the operating table, opened her up, and saw there's nothing wrong. Put her back together, and she kept her.
Awesome.
She had 2 children later on in life.
Oh, how
So
lovely.
these rumors started spreading around the family. Al did this, and then of course we got, they had to meet me, and so that was one. And then I told my brother, I told my dad, and my mother. My mother used to come to I had some healing meetings in that little apartment. My mother would come, and she felt it too, and others would come. So yeah, I kind of, it wasn't just a big secret. It was kind of a flow of connection, and when the time is right, kind of thing. So yeah, I'm considered the weird one in the family for sure. I think there's quite an family in the Vancouver area, and I think everybody knows that I'm the weird one. Fine.
Your story is so inspiring. When you were talking about Andrew coming and asking you to be a medium, how did you sense, how did your spirits communicate with you before that versus when you became a medium?
Yeah.
Like, what was the difference?
Well, the difference is the form of communication they use is clairaudience, which I had right at the beginning. I was telling you about these experiences I had when I first came into Divine Love, and I was, communicating. And at times I could see them when they're there and they're speaking to me. in my mind, but it was their voice, and I knew it was their voice. So that's the majority of the communication I have with spirit. The communication as a medium, them speaking through me, is not the greater part of the communication I have with spirit. Never has been.
So can I ask, I was going to say, can you explain how the celestials use you to get their message through, Al?
Well, it's like somebody stepping into your body. So, don't think of the horror movies here. It's much more pleasant than that. Yeah, first of all, I usually feel them there. And sometimes they'll do that little clairaudient talk to me and give me a bit of an outline what they want to say, or they will use, and sometimes, I've got to tell you that they also speak to me in visions, pictures, and kind of a big ball of thought. So everything in that ball is all the information. And it just kind of comes in like a download. So when, this is not all the time, but especially if it's a more complicated message, they'll come in to my consciousness first, into my mind. I feel their presence outside of me. And they'll kind of bring some way, whatever is working, I guess, for the particular moment, to communicate, to give me an idea of what they want to say, and they kind of go over it, almost like a script.
Right.
So I don't kind of get lost. And then they step in. So you can feel, I can feel my body, the aura of my body expanding with that. I feel a divine love. That's a distinct feeling, which anybody out there who wants to be a medium, a celestial medium, if you don't have that feeling from the spirit of divine love, and you don't recognize that feeling of divine love, then that's what you need to do as number one, is to be cognizant and aware and be able to recognize that feeling, that distinct feeling of the divine love. Without that, you don't know who you're communicating with.
Right.
Anyway, that's a signal for me. When I feel, well, I see them anyway now, it's not such a big deal, but in the beginning, I had a deal with them. I said, only celestial spirits. I don't want to do anything else. And I said, I want you to protect me from everything else. So they said they would do that. And within a couple of weeks, they came to me with, this is all psychically, I'm seeing this. They came with this jacket. It looked like, it didn't have a collar, it kind of had a Nehru collar, and it was very loosely woven, like it was done on a loom. And they said, this is your cloak of protection. They put it on me, and it felt like the most comfortable thing. It's like, you think of your favorite piece of clothing. It felt like that. And it was the first time I wore it. And it was so comfortable. And they said, this will be on you and with you for the rest of your life. And so it is. Every time I think about it, I see it on me. So that was my protection. That's the second thing. Protection. You need to be protected. Because there are all kinds of spirits out there. There's all kinds of spirits.
Yeah.
And if you're an open door, then you're going to get every Tom, Dick, and Harry, up and down, light and dark, and sideways, and all kinds of guidance that may or may not be good. You're out in a sea on a raft, if you're not anchored with these very basic things. And
Years of praying.
And years of praying for divine love. So anyway, back to your question. So then they come in, they come in different ways. If they want to give a detailed message, it's a teaching. They come into my brain. So it's like my body isn't so much a part of it, and my brain is more a part of it.
Mm.
And then, it just keeps the flow of words, and I don't know what the next sentence is. It just comes out. It's a stream of consciousness. And they're providing the stream, not me. I'm setting back. I'm aware of it. I'm hearing everything. And some days I'm more in my body than others, but I'm not originating the words. I'm not composing them. They are. Sometimes they get stuck to something in my brain, kind of gets hung up, and I know the word, they know the word, but the brain isn't bringing out the word. It's very frustrating. And you'll see this sometimes if you ever listen to a replay, or if you're there, this kind of, kind of searching for another way around this little roadblock of a word. But anyway, that's kind of frustrating sometimes. And then if they're going to give a blessing and maybe a message that's fairly common, or it's simple, then I'll get on the full body experience with them here. And especially if Jesus comes through to give a blessing, man, that's something else. It's like I'm huge, and the energy is huge, and he's intent, and he's going down into the computer, and I could see the energy going through the computer and out into even, I think, through all those fiber optics, it's flowing and going out to.
We feel it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I'm absolutely blown away by that and how that's done and accomplished. I think it's amazing. It was Brooke folk that brought us into this Zoom world and suggesting maybe we should try this. And I said, well, again, I was skeptical. Again, I was a skeptic regarding this. I said, well, I guess we can give it a try, but I doubt anything's going to happen. But sure enough, so.
It works.
Do you feel that those of us that are on the divine love path that, lead a very good prayer life, do you feel that asking for the cloak of protection is enough to protect us from rogue spirits or, outside spirits?
Well, you gotta control your thoughts. I mean, if you're thinking negative things, if you're thinking things are going to draw in dark influences, then cloak of protection ain't going to help you, because it's your free will. So so that's part of it too. And again, that's okay. That's number 3. Be aware of your thoughts. Try and keep them manageable.
So
and I found now that I'm older and more mellow, I found that a lot easier. So yeah. I've certainly had lots of struggles with that over the years, with my thoughts, and being judgmental and being fearful and all the human things. The divine love doesn't preclude any of those challenges. What it does is give you the resources and the key to counteract them, and to hopefully put them aside, have the strength to do that. Understand why it's important to do it, because most people don't understand why it's important to do that. Because in Canada anyway, this is mostly a secular society. People aren't going to churches anymore. They're not getting moral guidance anymore. So people just do what they want. And, they think, and they're watching these video games where they're killing people left, right, and center, and abusing women and all that stuff. And now they're getting brainwashed into ideas and thoughts and attitudes that are very dark indeed. And that's very concerning to me. I mean, I feel very blessed that I began this. I guess if you were to think about it, probably in my mid to early teens, all the way through my life. I mean, how blessed is that?
Very.
To have a spiritual grounding for all those years of my life. Again, another benefit from feeling different and trying to understand why. So, yeah, thoughts are very important. Thoughts are very important.
Well, our time is getting long, but I know Beth always has one last question for people.
I do. Al, can you tell us what gives you most joy in your life?
What gives me most joy in my life? Do I have to stick to one thing?
No.
Okay, good. Well, when I see my grandson and he's only on Zoom,
Yeah. Ah.
that gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah, and he's still little, isn't he?
He's 15 months old. and
Oh,
he's
lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting so emotional, but there
Joy
are
does that. Joy fills your
there are
soul.
so many joyful things in my life that it's hard to name them all. My garden gives me joy. My prayers give me joy. The work gives me joy. The beauty in the world, where we are, what we have, our life gives me joy. Myself gives me joy. Finally, I found joy in myself. You know, it's been a while now, but my friends give me joy, all the people that we're meeting, and seeing how the divine love is opening up in the world, it gives me great joy.
And
Thank you, Al.
My friends in spirit and in the flesh give me great joy. There's
and
just so much to be joyful for. And sorry, I'm blubbering away here, but
you didn't
it's a
say
soul
Jean's
thing.
name.
This is the problem when your soul opens up. You don't know when something bubbles up from that soul and starts. The tears start flowing, and I often get embarrassed about that. But anyway, that's just the way it is.
That it is.
One of the prices you pay when you're sensitive like this. But anyway,
It's good. It's good for
many
others to
joyful
see.
things.
And I know you didn't say Jean's name, but I see that. You and Jean and you are such a close pair that when you say yourself gives you joy, I know that includes Jean.
Well, Gina and I have an interesting relationship because she also gives me lots of challenges. So
Yeah, but that gives
there is joy in the working through of the challenges and in those moments together where we know we're really together and, you know, we're experiencing this life together. And I know God brought us together, and I wouldn't be the man I am today without her.
without a doubt.
And all these wonderful people that have been brought into my life that have helped me to formulate who I am and formulate how I am in the world and to understand my own being, because, you know, the greatest discovery besides knowing God is knowing oneself and truly seeing what God created. That is a great joy. And knowing all these things in me. And I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. There's so much more in there, like there is in all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And each day is a gift to find out more, to express more, to be in the world and truly be in the world. You know, that to me is really important, that we all have to be present in our life, not to worry about yesterday or tomorrow, but to be present for today. And I always say this prayer, God, guide me today. If I'm to be used as an instrument for others, guide me, and may that be so. And I remember when I was working, I would kind of curtail that a little bit, because if I said that prayer for that day. I couldn't get any work done because people would be coming up to me left, right, and center. I worked outdoors, so in someone's garden, and somebody comes up, and another one, or another one, or another one, and I'm thinking, man, I can't get any work done here. But anyway, should quit going off into tangents.
Oh,
Well,
thank you. It's been
yeah.
absolutely fantastic, Al. Thank you for sharing. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure we all have.
Yes, we
Okay,
have.
well, if you ever have a time when you're taking stories, and I have many of those I could share.
Yeah, I was thinking that we need to do another segment on just stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can do that. Well, thank you for your words of wisdom about living life and being in the world. Good
Thank
words
you.
to end on. So thank you very much, Al. Beth and Yvonne, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you did. God
Good.
bless you all. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.